Let's hit it.
And welcome to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm your host, Lori La Bey, and I'm so excited that you're joining us today. We are going to have a fascinating conversation as usual as we learn from people all around the world at all ages and stages of life. Stay tuned as we shift our dementia care from crisis to comfort.
All right, here we go. What you think about, you will bring about.
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm your host, Lori La Bey, and I'm thrilled that you are here with us today. If you enjoyed our opening music, it's called Clarion Call by the Mark Arneson Band featuring Maya Dore, and you can download that on any of your favorite music platforms. For those of you that are new to Alzheimer Speaks Radio, we are about sound information, not just sound bites. We want to have real conversations with real people who get this area of life, who have been on the journey or who are working to make a difference within it. And so our goal is really to raise all voices, young and small, at every age and stage. So from those diagnosed to family and friends caring for a loved one, to professionals who serve in care, to researchers, advocates, musicians, movie directors, and more. We truly don't feel like we can make a real change unless we are inclusive of all. Now, today is a live show, so you could call in and ask a question or make a comment on what we're talking about today at 323-870-4602. Again, that number is 323-870-4602. Now, before I introduce our guest and we have our conversation about Life Giving Dementia Care, I'm going to give a couple of shout-outs. One is to Dementia Map. I am just so proud to be a co-founder of that platform. We are getting wonderful response. So if you have a service, product, or tool that you want more people to know about, you can go ahead and sign up for free. And if you want more exposure, we have paid plans as well. The site is totally free to any user, 24/7. No registration, no password to forget, no private information is passed hands. So check out dementiamap.com. There you will also be able to find out about the Memory Cafe directory, where people are really wondering, hey, are they opening up? Are they meeting back in person, or are they still virtual? There's still a mix out there. I know the one that I do with Arthur's Memory Cafe that meets every second and fourth Wednesday at 1 o'clock Central Time. We are going to continue to meet virtually. That's what the group has decided, because they kind of feel like we're going to get hit again with another variant, and they don't want to have to give it up again, that meeting in person, because it was hard the first time. So they've decided just to kind of go with the flow for right now. I also want to have you check out Coro Health. That's Coro Health. They are still allowing people to download two of their music apps, Music First and Coro Faith, for free. And they're going to do that until the end of the year. So how cool is that? Let's see. And then things are tightening up for Maud's Ventures. It's just going to be the end of this year, or of this month, that you can go ahead and still submit an application for one of their 3 challenges. And those challenges, again, are for aphasia, for, respite care, and also adaptive clothing. So if that is of interest to you, please go check that out. Again, just go to maudsventures.org to get more information. Again, they're giving away $50,000 to $100,000. That's not chicken feed. So I just say kudos to them. I just absolutely Absolutely love that. I want to give a reminder that November 2nd, Together for Dementia is having a conference, and they're bringing people from around the world together, and you can register for that event. You can just go to alzheimerspeaks.com and go right to our homepage on that, and there'll be more information there. I'm also going to be doing a program for Artist Senior Living, and that will be a virtual event that will be happening on August 3rd, and that is for everybody. And I'll be rolling out a little bit more in terms of details on that, or you can go to any of the Artist Senior Living communities. That'll be from 5:30 to 6:30, and that is Central Time that I'm quoting. And register on any of the artist formats there. If you go to their website, just go to events. And I look forward to seeing you there. Take that back. I said the wrong date. It's August 10th, not August 3rd. My air. So I am going to flip us over so we can hear from the footbar walker, and then I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest. We'll be right back.
Introducing the life-changing footbar walker.
I'm Peggy from Danville, Kentucky, and I'm 91 years old. The footbar walker revolutionized my care of George. The saving that I made from having to put him in a nursing home came to about $192,000. The footbar walker opens and closes just like a standard walker. The only thing that is different is the top bar and the foot bar. Does that ever make a difference?
Does someone you love use a walker? Do they struggle to get up from a seated position? Are you a caregiver dealing with physical pain and stress as you help your patient? The footbar walker was designed to assist not only the patient, but also the caregiver. Patients have more control standing up, and no lifting from the caregiver is required. See how it works at thefootbarwalker.com. That's thefootbarwalker.com. Peggy, would you recommend the footbar walker?
Do I ever? I would not be in the health that I'm in today at this age had it not been for the footbar walker.
Well, welcome back. It's time to introduce you to our guest today. We are thrilled to have with us Toni Kanzler, and she wears several hats. She's a wife, a mother to 3 sons, a CPA, an entrepreneur, a private school administrator, a nonprofit volunteer, and a board member, and is now a best-selling author. Talk about busy. But she says that isn't what really was her greatest privilege and ultimate joy. It was really that of caring for her own mother for several years. So welcome, Toni. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Lori. Thanks so much for having me on your show.
Well, I am excited to have this conversation with you, needless to say. You sound like a real mover and shaker and probably a type A personality, I would guess.
Yeah, all those personality tests. Type A, assertive, busy, those kinds of things. So, I keep busy.
I can relate. Well, I mentioned in your intro that you were caring for your mom. Why don't you tell us if you've been personally touched by dementia in your own family or circle of friends? Did your mom have dementia, or were you caring for her in a different capacity?
Well, actually, my parents lived with us for a number of years. We first kind of started on just even an awareness of dementia and Alzheimer's through one of my mom's sisters. My Aunt Hollis had dementia, and it was just kind of one of those things where it's like, is somebody that you visit once or twice a year. And so you go, wow, what's going on with Aunt Hollis kind of thing. And so in talking with my cousins, we were able to, learn about her diagnosis and what she was dealing with. But I still didn't know anything about that. And, it's like, wow, Aunt Hollis has dementia. That's awful. It didn't occur to me that my mom might end up dealing with that. But that was ultimately what happened. And fortunately, my folks were living with us. We had decided, in the early 2000s, our boys were getting into those teen years, and we were spread from like 4 to 14 between the three of them in age. And so we needed a bigger house. And at the same time, my folks were in their mid-70s, and my mom had this growing honey-do list for my dad there at the house, and my dad also had a list, and nowhere on it was her honey-do list. He had no interest at all in doing the stuff to the house. He'd had it. He'd had enough. And we ended up having a huge rain here in Indianapolis, and their basement flooded. And he was like, I've had it. I'm done with this. And so my husband, saint that he is, decided to suggest, why don't we, if we're going to build a house, why don't we just get one that will accommodate all 7 of us? So my dad jumped on that train right away. Oh, yeah, this will be great. My mom, not so much so. She actually ended up moving in with us, her and my dad kicking and screaming. But she did it, and, in the end was very, very glad that she did so. But with them living with us, over time, it had probably been maybe 8 years into our time together that we started to see issues with my mom.
Okay.
And realized that's what we were going to be dealing with.
Okay. It's an interesting journey on how everybody gets to where they are and how you noticed or don't notice things, over time. It just fascinates me. I'm wondering, you had mentioned in terms of getting started with your journey, you had kind of noticed things ahead of time a little bit, and and then there was that perfect moment of, if we're going to build, let's just make sense so that we don't have to regroup later on, I guess is what your husband was probably thinking. How did the rest of the family, you'd mentioned about how your mom felt and how your dad felt, but what about the rest of your family? What about your 3 boys?
Well, the boys, thought it was just going to be a big party. The 2 older ones, they were like, great, Nana and Papa will be here and that'll be fun. But they were pretty busy. They were playing sports and they were in high school, and, so it really didn't matter much to them. Our house, we've got a number of bedrooms and areas, so that my mom, to help her in the transition, we literally picked up her living room and moved it to our new living room so that she would be comfortable. She ended up rarely using it. She ended up favoring her bedroom. But so my folks basically had the run of the main floor, other than my husband having his office. He's a CPA and he has his own practice. So he had an office on the main floor, but the laundry room, kitchen, they had a master bedroom and suite, and her living room, all on the main floor. And then my dad's a tinkerer, putterer type person. He was already retired. My mom worked until she was 80. But my dad was retired, and so he brought all his workshop stuff, and we set up an area for him in the basement. And he would just go down there and tinker all day, other than for his daily trip to either Goodwill or Big Lots.
Okay.
He had to make that daily trip out and piddle around in those shops and buy $10 or $20 worth of stuff every day and bring it home. I'm still sorting through that stuff. He's been gone 6 years. We're still trying to sort through the stuff that he put into his workshop downstairs. But so anyway, the older boys were they were good with that. The youngest, Ethan, he was so young when we all moved in together. He was 5, I think. He really doesn't remember what it was like not to have them here. So, he really enjoyed it. Other than he and my dad had similar personalities in some ways, and so they would lock horns on occasion. And at some point when Ethan started getting busy with sports and whatnot and wasn't as engaged with my dad, that was hard on my dad because he missed not having that interaction with his grandkids, which was one of his motivations for us all to live together.
Well, and that's
understandable. Yeah, it is. And as far as my husband, no idea is ever ends up quite as good as what you think it will be. So for him, it's like, this will be great. And as time went on, it's like, well, this has its challenges. For example, I mentioned my husband has his office here on the main floor by the front door for clients to come in. And it's right over my dad's workshop. My dad was very hard of hearing. So he would turn on the TV so that he could hear it, but so could my husband and so could anybody on the second floor. I mean, it was loud. So that was one of the challenges that, he had to deal with, trying to find a solution for my dad to be able to hear the TV, but it not disrupt his business here. So things like that, would happen. But, those are to be expected when you've got two families living together, no matter how close we might be. We have to work through it. My mom always said there's no kitchen big enough for two women. But that's not true. You can work it out.
Yeah. Well, boy, you guys sound like you were really accommodating there in floor plan and design and the whole 9 yards there. So kudos to you guys for coming up with that alternative. There's so many different ways that this can go. And there's not a right or a wrong way, because not everybody can afford to go build a new house or has the personalities that can live together either, as a realm. And so I totally understand that. You wrote this book, and I'm always curious why you wrote it and how you picked your title, because I think those are just such critical pieces of the whole piece. So can you tell us, why you picked the title you did, and where did it come from? Because it's a lot of work to write a book.
It is. I read after I started writing that surveys show that 80% of the American population would love to write a book, of the adults. And about 1% of them actually get around to doing it. And now that I've done it, I understand why, because it can be really intimidating. It's like, how do you even get started? But, for me, as I went through the journey, it can be really isolating to be a caregiver. You get so busy with trying to do the right thing. You love this person and you're trying to help, but you also have a life, and maybe so you might have a family that you're caring for. You might be employed outside the home. You might have all these other responsibilities, and so you kind of perk along. At least I did, and I know some others who did the same thing. It didn't occur to me to look for resources to help me in that. Our physicians had given us some resources, so I knew there were some out there, but I'm just so busy kind of going from point A to B to C to D that I didn't look for help. So there were mistakes I made along the way. Some I realized quickly, some I didn't realize until a long time into the journey. So once my mother had passed away, and I started thinking about all of this, I also was thinking, my aunt had this, my mother had this. There's a chance that I might get this. And I don't want the boys and Dan to struggle the way I did. I want them to know that there are resources. I want them to remember to use them. I want them to know how to deal with the doctors and how to deal with those living decisions when you get to that point, and just how to deal with their friends and build a support team. So I resolved to write a series of just notes, just write everything down that I had learned, so that I could give that to them. But then I started noticing, and you probably had the same experience, Lori, it's like every other person you talk to is either dealing with dementia directly as a caregiver, or they have a spouse or a friend it's so prevalent. The last statistic I saw was something like 6.2 million dementia and Alzheimer's patients right now in our country. And so I would, they would bring that up, or it would come up in discussion, and I would share the things that I had learned and what my experiences were, and it was helpful to them. And so I eventually went, oh, duh, okay, you've kind of wanted to write a book for 20 years, and you have this experience. Why not do a book instead of write a bunch of notes to your boys that maybe other people could benefit from? So that's why I decided to write the book. Then coming up with a title for a book is so hard.
Yep.
Good grief. I had no idea. Well, to begin with, I had what I thought was a great title, and it was a great title because there was already a book out there with that title. It's like, oh, man, what am I going to do now? So at any rate, I went through lots and lots of thinking on it. And as I was writing the book, it was like almost the last line of the book in summation that, it can be a life-giving experience, if you're able to go in with your eyes wide open and have the right expectations for yourself and for your loved one. Up until a certain point, you can really have some good experiences with them and some unique experiences that you might not have had before. And so as I read that, it was like, oh, life-giving dementia care. How do you go about this journey with the hope and encouragement and expectation that there is a way to make the best out of this. It doesn't have to be a complete and utter death knell misery once you get that diagnosis. It's just a different journey than what you would have had without the diagnosis. So that's how it came about.
Okay. Well, and I like the life-giving because I think so much of the disease, again, and stigma is wrapped around doom and gloom. There's no way out of this. You are stuck. You have no control. You have no life. And that, for me, I didn't find that to be true at all. I found it to be very much so life-giving and taught me how to communicate in different ways on different levels and to prioritize things in my life differently. I thought it was just a huge, huge gift. Why don't you talk about what the main, I should say not what the main message is. I'll get to that in a moment. But who did you write the book for, and how can it help them? Is it families? Is it professionals? Is it both?
So that's a fabulous question. So, I already mentioned I started out writing it for my family, and then that broadened out to there will be other people out there who would be caregivers who don't know what to do. They go with someone to the doctor, and the doctor says, hi, here are the results. You have dementia. And so then it's like, okay, what do I do now? What's step one? Or even before that, when the person is just not behaving the way you would expect, and there are all these signs. It's not just forgetting. There's a lot more than that. You see the personality changes. You see mood changes. You see other things that something's wrong. We got to figure out what it is. Can you even get them to the doctor?
Mm-hmm.
I had to kind of play games with my mom just to get her to the doctor to get a diagnosis, because she wasn't willing to consider that as a possibility, dementia. So, so at any rate, you're looking at that person who kind of was in the same boat I was. Can I help them? But it's really been interesting as the book has been published, and I've started getting feedback and reviews from people. Mm-hmm. It really is hitting groups that I didn't think about when I first wrote the book, and that's just a thrill for me to be able to expand the reach there. So one group that it's helping more than I thought are people whose loved one has already passed away, mm-hmm. Because you tend to second guess yourself and, I should have done this. Why didn't I do that? Or all kinds of resources that you find out were there and you didn't reach out to. So I've had a number of people tell me that by reading the book, and because I was in places kind of brutally honest with how I was feeling and some of the things I was going through, it helped them to think, okay, so I'm not alone in the things that I was thinking. Maybe I'm not an awful person that sometimes I hid from my person because I just couldn't answer the same question for the 15th time. You wear down over time. And, then you start to beat yourself up about that. And so, it helped them to feel better about that. It helped them to see that, I did make some good decisions. I didn't do everything bad. So that's been really helpful to know that there are people who it was helping them heal, to read the book, just like it helped me to heal some to write it. Mm-hmm. That's been an interesting group. And then there's that group of people who are friends. So, if you're a caregiver, okay, how do you go to your friend and say, hey, could you take my mom to her doctor's appointment? Or could you come sit with her for an hour while I go do X, Y, Z? How do you tell them what to expect? It's hard to know what to ask for, because mm-hmm. sometimes the needs come up so quickly, you can't really plan ahead like that. And then from the friend's perspective, they may know that you're going through this, but if they haven't been through it themselves, they don't really know what that entails. So they don't know what to offer in terms of help. So they'll say, please let me know if there's anything I can do. Well, that's great. But the caregiver, it's just hard to match those two pieces up. Mm-hmm. And so I'm finding that people who have friends going through this, that read the book, they have a much better understanding of what actually is happening and how they can help their friends, so that they can make offers of assistance by observing rather than waiting to be asked. Mm-hmm. And so that really helps just the whole experience for the caregiver and for the patient, and the friends are able to help. So that's a big group. And then the last group that I didn't think about, my number one sales category on Amazon is with the nurses.
I didn't think about that. Surprise me. That doesn't surprise me because I think they are so pulled on the floor with so many things to do, and yet they see and they're responsible for what the team is doing so much of the time, and so I think they're just eager to learn more. I think they're seeing this more. It's talked about more, and people's expectation is there will be some type of compassionate care to deal with this, not just medicate them like we used to do ages ago. I mean, things have really changed. You can't just restrain somebody because they're having a reaction to something, and those are the types of things that used to happen, and it was never really addressed what was truly going on, and how can we live graciously for the person diagnosed as well as those who care for them, with this disease. So I think that's great that nurses are checking you out and what all you have to say. I think that's fantastic.
Well, it's exciting that that's happening, and with my mom having gone through the assisted living rehab center experience, and then my dad was in the hospital for a month before he passed away with the issues that he was dealing with. I could see what you're talking about with the nurses being pulled, and sometimes that lack of focus on respect and grace, for the patient, just because, not because they're bad or anything like that, not at all. It's just they have so much to do, and the responsibility, the stakes are high, very high for healthcare caregivers, and so sometimes they have to pick and choose, and maybe those respect and gracious perspectives kind of fall down the list a little bit. And so a book like mine does, as they learn more about the perspective of the patient and the caregiver, can help to bring those things more to the forefront, so they're perhaps a more natural response than something that they just have to remind themselves to do. I do have in the book, there were times when I was writing about different parts of the journey that I thought, well, my mom told me this, and my mom told me that, and so I inserted little gray sections throughout the book that are written from the perspective of the patient, because I thought that might be helpful. And I've gotten some really good feedback on that as well, that people have found that to be helpful to them to better understand the impact of the disease.
Yeah, well, I think that's a really important piece of the pie, is that we have to ask and we have to listen. We have to not just hear something and let it go in one ear and out the other, but really take it for a solid answer. And if we don't get it, then go, maybe I need to ask a second question. If I'm not understanding what it is they're trying to tell me, or put it in a different term, or maybe just pray on it, that it'll come to you. Because there always is, I think, a very succinct and very simple way to deal with things. And we tend to, I think, many times make things so complicated. And then those complications are kind of a ripple effect. And just like a medication can have side effects, I think our communication can have side effects and things coming out sideways and bouncing off walls. I mean, we've all experienced that, where how did we, and you're sitting back going, how did we get here? I just asked a question. It's like, what happened, because we're not taking everything in. We're not realizing that something was maybe taken wrong, the way you said it or the way you did it, and we're just pushing through or pushing on, and we're bypassing them and making them feel belittled. If that's a person with dementia or not, it doesn't make any difference. We do it all the time, and I think I think dementia makes us, if we're really going to care, if we're really going to give this this care and receive it back. We have to slow down and we have to pay attention. So I love, that you're talking about that. What do you think your main message is to readers to know from your personal story?
I think the main lessons that I learned through it, that I think readers of the book could glean as well, is you used the words doom and gloom a few minutes ago. You really can do this. It is a scary thing. I haven't personally had to go through diagnosis like, for instance, cancer. I've read about when people get that diagnosis, they don't hear anything that's said after that.
Yep.
And with the dementia, when they said those words, my personality type, I went immediately into okay, what do I do now? What's first? What's second? What's third? Didn't really get to process emotionally what that all was going to mean. And so, as I started down the checklist and going through the different phases of the disease with my mom, I really did learn that this can be done, and it doesn't have to be miserable for yourself or for your loved one. And there are memories to be made, and there are experiences that can be so special. But you need to go into it with a level of preparation and understanding and expectation, so that you can be intentional about your time, intentional about your words, about activities, so many aspects of it. And there are keys to it. Expectations, I think, are a key. Time and slowing down, like you said, are a key to that. And so I wanted people to understand that that these things can happen, and that there are different perspectives that feed into this journey. You've got to build a team. How do you do that? There are things, my husband and I both happen to be CPAs, so the numbers aspect of it on the back end weren't scary to us, but I've talked to lots of people who, it's like, how do we do estate planning? How do we do funeral planning? What do we, what about, can I sign papers? Do they sign papers? What do we do with all this? And, those are things that are better handled early on than late. And so I just wanted to kind of lay out the path for people that, here's the first thing. She started putting milk in the pantry instead of the fridge, or whatever the patient might be doing from a behavior standpoint that made you kind of turn your head sideways and go, what's this? Mm-hmm. From that point to the point where you're, sitting across the desk from an attorney. How do you go through all of this? You can do it. It doesn't have to be real complex for most people. And you can come out on the other side with some special memories. For us, my mother's body wore out before her mind. So we didn't have to deal with her looking at me with a blank face, not knowing who I was. So many people have to deal with that. But we didn't get to that point. For our experience, we were able to, to really have some special times with my mom. And, I mentioned the perspectives. I have some Q&A in the back of the book from other caregivers, kind of what they learned through their journey. And then I ask questions of my kids and my husband, what they saw as the impact on me, the impact on our family of my my mom going through this and living with us. And that was really enlightening to me as well, because during the time, I never stopped to ask them. Didn't occur to me. I was on the treadmill trying to keep going.
Well, and don't you think, and maybe this is incorrect in your situation, but I think a lot of times we think we're doing better than what we are, that we got it handled, and nobody sees that we're stressed. and yet they pretty much pick up on all of that and go, okay, get out of the way. She's coming,
Exactly. And it was hard. Boy, it was hard reading the things that my 3 boys had to say.
Mm-hmm. But what a great learning tool for the next family, because I think, and I see this a lot with families where they don't tell the kids what's going on, and the kids want to help, and the kids know things have changed, because the priorities in the whole household have changed. If you've said it or not, they have, because you've added a whole nother, thing of responsibility on, and that has the impact. And when we don't talk about it, and I don't know if your kids were like this, but I'm sure my daughter felt this way, as like, how come I'm not a priority anymore, or not as high as I used to be in the food chain, because there's other things that had to be taken care of. But for some kids, when I went to the schools and talked, I mean, it really affected them in a very negative way, and and they felt less than. They didn't really, depending on their age, didn't understand really what was going on or why it was happening. And then the other really frustrating thing that they brought up when I've gone into the schools is that they've wanted to help, and they felt like they were pushed away, like they were too little and they didn't need to know about this. And I think sometimes with families, not all, but we want to protect them from being responsible, or protect them, from this could happen, so that they can still be kids. But we really can't protect them, because they're part of the family. So, the whole family dynamics changes and shifts, and there are beautiful things that they can bring to the relationship and bring as respite or help with chores that would make them feel better, instead of observing their parents kind of going crazy trying to handle something that they know is maybe at times over their head.
Yeah, exactly. It's a wonderful point that you're making, because I do think, at least from my perspective, my instinct was to protect them, as you said, and not that I thought knowledge would hurt them, but it's like, well, they're busy and they have all this stuff going on. By the time she got moved along in her illness, I had one in college, I had one married, I had one in high school, and they had a lot going on too. And so I, naively, I'm doing fine, I'm plugging along, she's doing okay, and I just didn't even notice how upside down everything was, how she really was the number one priority. And number 2 was, the child that was still at home. And number 3 was my work. And number 4 was, way down the list was me and my husband. And there's so many things they could have helped with. Like, my mom, she tried to do things before she was diagnosed to help at the house, because she wanted to be a part, and we loved that. She adopted the laundry, and she didn't necessarily do the laundry, but she loved folding it, and she was great at it. And I loved having her fold the laundry. So, I would take her baskets of laundry to fold, and she loved doing that. Well, as her disease progressed, who knows what socks you were wearing. She could not match the socks, but she would continue to do that. And so then I would spend time upstairs trying to unmatch and, fix all that. Well, it would have been so easy for me to look at Ethan, who was still here at home, and say, hey, take 10 minutes and go in with Nana and, match socks, and then she can stuff them together.
Mm-hmm.
And she would have loved that. They could have laughed and had a good time. It would have been so easy. But I didn't even stop long enough to think about what the kids could have been involved in. And so I missed that opportunity. I missed it for her. I missed it for them. But maybe the next family who reads this book will see, I need to be intentional about this. I need to involve them. And younger kids, she was never a game player. When I was growing up, I'm an only child, and she came from a huge family who just, they didn't have games. They were of poorer means and didn't do that. So games weren't her thing. But as she went through her disease, she started asking me about cards. Could we play cards? And I'm like, what? Who are you and what'd you do with my mother kind of thing. But that shouldn't surprise me, because there are a lot of things that come up as the disease progresses that are unusual for a person. So that's why you've got to change your expectations and just be open to lots of new things.
Agree. And it's funny when you were talking about just kind of the slowing down a little bit and paying attention to those things that we're missing. Those are some really beautiful moments. That to think that your child could have done this, or I think even when you were talking about the socks, I just think of depending on where I was going, I probably would have worn them, and every time I looked down, I would have smiled and thinking that was Mom, because I remember my grandchildren doing my toes during COVID, and I had a 5-year-old and a 9-year-old, and each took a foot, and oh my gosh, they did not look professional, but they took so much joy in doing that. And so even I went out with them like that, and people are like, Laura, your feet. And I'm like, I got to tell you the story of how they prepared and got ready, and the giggles. And I know what they look like, but I look at them and I just smile and I am joyful. And I got to that place with Mom too, where I could let things go instead of having everything to be perfect, and I think even to a time, and this had nothing to do with my mom, but it gets to that mind frame of life was never perfect to begin with, and so why do we think it has to be when dementia hits? I mean, I remember going to a B2B meeting, and we're going around, we're all introducing, and I bowed my head down, and there I have a blue and a brown shoe on, and I just burst out laughing, because I got dressed in the dark. My husband was sleeping. I was kind of sneaking out early in the morning. And I'm like, I could have been all embarrassed, and it was just like, hey, so such is life. Anyways, it is at my house, and I think learning to, kind of take that silly road sometimes doesn't kill us when we think it's gonna, we think it's just gonna destroy our reputation or, our routine or whatever. I find when I'm able to laugh, it kind of fills my soul back up and gives me a little bit more energy to plug along. I don't know if you sense that as well or not in your life.
Oh, absolutely. And my mother was, she was very, very into proud woman, and accepting help was just not part of her personality, and that completely changed during her disease, where she became, she anticipated the help and was excited about it, and let's do this together and these kinds of things, and I really enjoyed that because I wasn't able to help her before that. She just wouldn't see to it. But being able to do that, and then she as a result of that, she also became more willing to laugh at herself. And so, she would say things. She used to watch television. She loved television, and so even before the disease. But she had these notepads, these little 5-inch by 4-inch notepads, and she would write down all the things that she thought were interesting. while she was watching television or things she wanted to order. So we took our cards away. But anyway, I do have 3 Instant Pots. Ordered 3 of them. But at any rate, we would go through those notepads sometimes, and we would just laugh at some of the things that she found interesting, because she would look at it later and go, why did I write down about, the new set, where to get ceramic breaks or something like that, because she doesn't care about that. So it was funny, those kinds of things, or how she would write it down, or how many times she would say, remember to tell Toni XYZ. It was just, it was fun, and I've kept several of those notepads and still go through them.
Oh, too funny. Well, I can't believe we're down to less than 10 minutes already. This time just always goes so fast when you're having a, just kind of in sync with the conversation. So I wanted to ask you, since your mom lived with you during most of her disease, how did that impact you and your family differently? And I know we talked about that a little bit, but versus, let's say, if she was in a community or was able to be cared for on her own at home, what were some of the things that you see kind of as black and white for yourself and for your husband and your kids?
Sure. Well, I think for I mentioned that I'm an only child, so there were times where I really had to, be pretty involved with them. When they lived in their own home, my mom would get bronchitis, pretty serious bouts of bronchitis, several times a year. It just seemed like she was always sick, and so I was always going over trying to help her out, because my dad never really was sure what to do. He handled all of his medical care through the VA since he was an Air Force veteran. So we never really knew what was going on with him. He didn't really share all that much about it. But with my mom, I would call and check on her every day, or she would call me and I'm sick again. When they were living with us, after about 3 years, it dawned on me, she is never sick, ever. And so I have no doubt that they lived much longer and much more comfortable lives being with us than if they had been in their homes separately. I think by them being with us, there are pros and cons. It's just like when you see your niece and nephew once a year, or you have a friend that you haven't seen their kids for a while, and it's like, wow, you grew like 6 inches since I saw you last. And they may not even notice. There were things happening with my mom that we didn't notice who were living here with her that may have delayed our getting a diagnosis and starting a treatment plan for her. Because she was living here. If she had been in her own home or in a senior facility or something, and I wasn't seeing her constantly, we might have noticed that more. At the same time, by her living with us, I knew her so much better, so that when I could tell once we had the diagnosis, I really could see how things were progressing. When she fell and broke her hip and had to go into a rehab facility, I was much better prepared to help the nursing staff and the physicians direct her care, because I knew her so well. I wasn't having to run back and forth to a house all the time, to try. Because if they're living in their own home, in our case anyway, we would have been taking care of 2 houses. That would have been really, really a challenge. I did see, even as she moved into the rehab facilities, that it was more of a challenge for me, for sure, to keep track of how she was doing. You know how when you sent your first child to kindergarten, and all of a sudden it struck you, you don't know all their friends. You don't know how people are treating them, you know, and are they going to tell you everything? And, you know, you play 20 questions when they come home in the afternoon and you're getting these cryptic answers. So it was the same kind of thing. I didn't know everything that was going on with her anymore. And that was hard. And she had a real hard time answering the phone. She could never figure out how to do it or where it was at. And so often, you know, I couldn't go every day. So on the days I couldn't go, I would try to call, and I would have to call the nurse's station. And, you know, sometimes they were all out and weren't answering, and I would have a hard time reaching her. And so I just didn't know, hardly ever got to connect with the doctor. Which when she was living with us, I was taking her to all of her doctor's appointments, and I would batch them together so that they were, you know, for the most part, all within, you know, 2 or 3 days, once a month. And then we would make an excursion out of it. We'd go to lunch or do something after the appointments. But, you know, I was up to speed on all of her medical care. And that just was not the case when she was in a facility. And not any fault of the facility. You know, they've got a number of people that they're trying to keep track of. And so, you know, it's up to the caregiver and the family to insert yourself into that process and make sure that you know what's going on and can help direct things as best as possible. So, you know, there are pros and cons. You know, like you said, it definitely having her here in our home upended things and changed the ebb and flow of our home and changed our relationships for a time. But I'm so glad that we were able to do that.
Yeah, it really is such an honor to be able to walk with somebody on that journey and be part. I'm just going to give a plug for another company really quick. There's a company called Careful with 2 L's at the end, and it's a financial monitoring program that alerts you if someone is late or if they're overpaying, so you can find out about scams and, you know, if their balance is getting light, and it sends stuff to you instead of having to track down and finding out the little problems have become big problems. And for anyone who's caring out there, I wish I would have had that to check on my own back in the day. Really, really a cool program. Well, Toni, we have to wrap up, and I want to make sure that we get your contact information. And so people can email you at Toni, that's Toni, and then last name Kanzler, author, at gmail.com. And your book can be found on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple, Walmart. So it's kind of all over there, folks. But I would highly recommend that you take a peek at that. And we've got Toni's contact information and a promo of her book video as well, right on Alzheimer's Speaks here. But thank you so much for all you did to care for your mom and taking the time to share what you learned with the rest of us. And like I said, I know writing a book is not as simple as everybody thinks it is. And to share your knowledge, it was brilliant, and I really enjoyed our conversation today. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Lori. It was a pleasure to be able to share, and I'm just always excited and praying that as many people as possible can be helped by the experience.
Wonderful. Thank you. And for those of you listening to Alzheimer's Speaks Radio, maybe you too have a story to tell. You don't have to write it down to share it. So reach out to me at radio@alzheimersspeaks.com, or you can just go to alzheimersspeaks.com and email me from there as well. I'm also on Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and all those other wonderful social media platforms. Together, we can make the planet better and serve one another in a brilliant, brilliant way. So, again, till the next show, everybody. We will talk soon. Bye now.
Hey everybody, Jared Sebestier, host of Retire Repurposed. This podcast is dedicated to help people transition into fulfilling and purposeful retirements. Retirement is a big life change. In fact, the two most dangerous years of a person's life are the year they were born and the year they retire. Few people can just flip the switch from working a career 30 or 40 plus years, retiring on Friday, without methodical steps to living what we call a repurposed retirement. To listen now, search Retire Repurposed on your favorite podcast platform, Senior Resource, or Life Audio.